500 kilograms has been done.
I wasn't Eddie Hall lifting that weight in the arena. I was Eddie Hall in a different place.
We wouldn't even be talking about the 500 kilo deadlift if it wasn't for me right now.
The heaviest lift in human history! A half-ton! Eddie the Beast Hall!
They say that records are meant to be broken. And in a world where human strength and achievements are constantly evolving, truer words have never been spoken. With record after record falling at every major event, it's usually never a matter of if a record can be broken. It's always a matter of when, where, and how. Once in a lifetime and once in human history used to be terms reserved for the rarest of athletes, but have now become commonplace in the ever-evolving world of professional sports.
I really knew that I was like seeing history.
However, one term that undeniably cannot be trivialized or taken lightly is first. While every subsequent record or feat deserves the same recognition and admiration, there's just something about being the first to accomplish that goal that makes it all the more impressive. No matter how many people do it after you, you are still the first to get there, paving the way and proving it possible for all those striving for the same goal. For Eddie Hall, there was no standard. No previous 500 kilogram deadlifter to prove that it could be done. So it was him against himself on the race to accomplish what many questioned was even possible. The greatest deadlift in all of human history. But to best understand how he was able to do it, we need to take a look at how it all began. Edward Stephen Hall was born January 15, 1988, in Newcastle-under-Lyme, Staffordshire, England. Growing up in a working-class family, he was always an energetic kid full of life and enthusiasm. His parents, who worked hard to provide for him and his siblings, instilled in him the values of hard work and perseverance. His father worked as a lorry driver, often spending long hours on the road, while his mother took various jobs to help support the family. Despite their busy schedules, they always made time to support his interests and his dreams. His grandparents also played a significant role in his upbringing, teaching Eddie the importance of family and community. Now, being the youngest of 3 brothers, he was also born into a competitive atmosphere, constantly feeling the need to prove himself as the baby of the family. As Eddie would put it in his interview with the Daft Trucking Company, everything is competition with your brothers. Who can eat the fastest? Who's the best fighter? As in most families, the youngest had to go everywhere their siblings went, and as they were competitive swimmers, I didn't want to miss out, so I started competing at the age of 5. Swimming provided a structured environment where he could channel his energy and competitive spirit. He trained rigorously, waking up early for swim practice and dedicating countless hours to improving his technique. Now, like most kids, Eddie drew a lot of inspiration from a legendary figure, specifically a figure that would inspire an entire generation of bodybuilders and powerlifters, none other than Arnold Schwarzenegger. Drawing a ton of inspiration from Arnold's rhetoric around motivation and will, as well as studying his intensity in his workouts, Eddie channeled that same mindset in swimming. The discipline and dedication required for swimming taught him valuable lessons about hard work and perseverance, and his drive to compete with his older brothers played a major role in his success, because he was getting increasingly annoyed with the fact that he wasn't on their level yet, indicating to him that he would need to work significantly harder to get there. As Eddie himself would later say, "I realized I would have to work harder, so I started training harder. At 5 a.m. every morning, I would cycle to the pool for a 90-minute session and ate a good diet that allowed me to keep my energy levels up." His coaches recognized his potential and pushed him even further to excel, which further fueled his ambitious nature. Swimming also taught him the importance of goal setting and the satisfaction of achieving major milestones. So, after years of hard work and dedication, by the age of 12, he was selected to represent the Great Britain youth team at the UK Nationals for swimming, where he won 4 gold medals and 1 silver, and set 2 British records in the process. This massive leap in his really young career had him dreaming of making it to the Olympics someday, an honor that was well within the realm of possibility for him. Now, being Olympics bound didn't just come with the local acclaim and bragging rights he so desperately wanted with his brothers. Those expectations also came with an immense amount of pressure that he just couldn't handle. This pressure would send Eddie down a path of depression by the age of 14, for which he was prescribed Prozac to help regulate his emotions. This was the catalyst for his venture into mental health advocacy, as it was a topic he was not ashamed nor afraid to talk about.
I actually went through a stage of really bad depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
And so as a 13-year-old kid being prescribed Prozac, which is like an antidepressant, and you're seeing a psychiatrist. So whilst all my mates are at school learning the GCSEs and having fun, you know, I was sat in front of a psychiatrist trying to get my life back together.
By the time he reached high school, Eddie started hitting roadblocks when he began facing academic challenges and behavioral issues at Clayton Academy. The discipline and structure of swimming was also starting to wane, as his early grind had caused him to get burnt out and fall out of love with it. He was also finding himself getting into trouble at school a lot more frequently. He'd also gotten diagnosed with dyslexia, which made schoolwork particularly challenging. Despite these setbacks and the fizzling out of his budding swimming career, his passion for physical fitness remained, but so did his disciplinary issues. At 15, he was expelled from Clayton Academy and had to find a new path. This pivotal moment marked the beginning of a significant transformation in his life. It was a difficult time, and he had to grow up quickly, because without a clear path to a formal education, the pressure was on to make something of himself.
You know, but I'm sure at that time getting labeled as the troublemaker, the bad kid, like you're not doing well, you're not behaving, all this, right? So
Yeah, so I guess at that age, there's a lot of pressure on you because, you know, that you've got to get those grades, you've got to get into college, otherwise you're not going to get a job and you're going to fail, and that's all you were told. You know, that's all that was told to me. Like, you're going to fail. Every time I was misbehaving in class, get out, you're going to fail in life.
Yeah.
You know, you're expelled, good luck, you're going to fail. Yeah. It was just constant, like, there's so much pressure on you to do good in life that when you do actually get put in that position where you are expelled and all these things that the teachers have been saying for the last year or so are coming true, like you're going to get expelled, you're not going to learn anything, you're going to end up, you know, with a shit job and all that. So yeah, that was a tough time. And
while living at home with nothing to do, he was able to delve even deeper into the philosophies of Arnold and the other golden era bodybuilders. So, having become fully addicted to the idea of building a physique like the Austrian oak, Eddie became determined to look just like him and become a famous bodybuilder. So, that became his dream, and he was focused on building the best physique he could. He got himself a gym membership and became a gym rat as he spent all his time training and eating. As soon as Eddie got into weightlifting, he was instantly hooked. The feeling of lifting heavy weights and pushing his physical limits was exhilarating. He began training seriously, dedicating himself to becoming stronger and more powerful, and this dedication paid off as he quickly made a name for himself in the local fitness scene. Eddie had gotten so big in the months after his fitness journey began that his presence was felt in every room he walked in. The kid clearly had some impressive genetic makeup, but maximizing that was becoming very expensive with the amount of food and supplements that he had to buy. So he needed a job, but also some educational structure outside of the gym. So Eddie and his parents decided on homeschooling, while at this time he also began working as a mechanic's apprentice. His mom had seen an advertisement in the paper for an apprentice position at Lex Commercials, a local DAF truck site, which she had him apply for, and by keeping his head down and continuing to grind, he would make major strides. Now, as you could imagine, during any of the free time he had in his 50-hour work week, he would lift. This routine truly tested the bounds of his physical and mental fortitude, as he was adding intense workouts to the already intense manual labor he was doing, something which the average person struggles to do. With a new passion and career, he got to a much better place in his young adulthood. But mechanic work wasn't just something he would do to help put food on the table. It was a critical turning point that introduced him to a completely new world of physical challenges. Challenges that forced him to develop a new type of resilience and build some very valuable life skills that he'd carry with him into the following years. The job was physically demanding, so he began to appreciate the importance of strength and endurance, as his imposing frame combined with the strength helped make him better at his job. At the same time, he found solace lifting weights after a long day's work, using the gym as an escape from the bullshit of everyday work life. He could just hit the weights and forget about his troubles, and these early days in the gym laid the foundation for his future as one of the greatest strength athletes of all time. The community at the gym welcomed him and provided mentorship, which was crucial in his early development. This new passion he found in weightlifting helped him regain the sense of structure that he lost when he left swimming for good. Now, as you could imagine, Eddie was becoming a unit in every sense of the word, and it became clear to everyone around him that he was destined for something more than just training in the gym. So the first people to encourage him to put that muscle to competitive use were his big brothers, who encouraged him to go into strongman, something which, while he hadn't considered, he was very intrigued in. In 2007, at the age of 19, with his brothers egging him on, Eddie entered his first strongman competition, which involved a truck pull, log lift, tire flip, and a deadlift, to name just a few of the events. Despite having zero experience in strongman competitions, he managed a 5th place placing out of 15 competitors, and that was all it took. The strongman bug had bitten him, and bitten him hard. Gone were the days where he aspired to be like Arnold on stage, because at this point he realized he had the potential to be even greater elsewhere. He knew he was comically stronger than the average guy at his age, but his first strongman competition not only solidified that, but confirmed that he was stronger than even seasoned competitors. So to Eddie, he may have found the next avenue that would allow him to be great. Now it was on, and so began his quest to become the strongest man in England. In his own words, "From then, I entered competition after competition, at first staying local, before moving on to qualifying events for England's Strongest Man. In many cases, I was beating some of the elite athletes that were regular competitors in the World's Strongest Man events, which made me even more driven to win. There was no better confirmation that this was the path he was destined for, and he'd seize the opportunity." After 3 years of improvement and dominating the local strongman scene, Eddie was ready, more ready than he had ever been to test himself against the best that England had to offer. All of this while still working as a mechanic. So when the opportunity to compete at the England Strongest Man competition presented itself, Eddie knew that he had to take it. You see, David Meir was qualified and set to compete, but had to pull out at the last second due to an injury. So he had Eddie take his place in 2010, and all he did was win the whole competition on his first try. Made even more impressive was the fact that he won by half a point. This win marked the beginning of his recognition as one of the best up-and-coming strongmen in Europe. He defended his title again the following year and won. So, being the competitor he was, the only next logical step was to test himself against the best in the UK.
Well, here's the winner of the first discipline. What can he do here?
The first 2 days, I'm not really too worried about, as long as I qualify for the final. And then on the final, well, they're all sort of static events, most of them, and I'm a static monster, really strong. Hopefully just blast it on the final.
He entered the UK Strongest Man competition in Belfast, Ireland in 2011 and won in dominant fashion, beating out Ken Nowicki and Richard Smith, with the highlight of his performance being his 1 minute and 19-second Viking hold, where he held 20 kilograms in each hand with his arms fully outstretched. However, the impressive feat was overshadowed by the severe injury he suffered as a result of pushing for that record, because he ended up with torn tendons in one of his arms. But despite the injury, he wasn't done. He still wanted to do the World's Strongest Man competition that upcoming fall. Unfortunately though, his ranking hadn't qualified him for 2011, so he'd have to settle for a spot at the 2012 competition, giving his arm enough time to heal. But having his competitive fire amplified by winning 3 massive competitions in consecutive years, he couldn't wait a whole year before competing again. So in February of 2012, he competed at what would be his first international competition, Giants Live in Melbourne, Australia, where he got the opportunity due to another injury to a competitor. He ended up placing 4th, a placing which got him invited to the Europe's Strongest Man in April of that same year, which was also hosted by Giants Live. He returned to the UK Strongest Man in 2012 and came out on top, securing his second victory at the event and solidifying himself as the strongest man that the UK had to offer. Winning the UK Strongest Man for a second time was a significant milestone. It gave him the confidence to pursue strongman competitions full time. He began training with a renewed sense of purpose, focusing on the unique challenges and events of strongman competitions. From carrying massive stones to pulling trucks, each event required a different kind of strength and technique. He studied the sport meticulously, learning from the best and continuously improving his skills. He watched videos of past competitions, analyzed the techniques of top athletes, and incorporated their methods into his own training. As he gained more experience and success, he started attracting local media attention in the strongman space. His intense training regimen, combined with his charismatic personality, made him a popular figure in the English strongman community. So, with his name rising through the ranks, there was more pressure to live up to. Pressure which he struggled with. In the summer of 2012, he competed at his first Britain's Strongest Man competition, where he finished in 8th place. Now, while en route to the 2012's Europe's Strongest Man, what Eddie didn't realize was that this competition would be unlike anything he had ever seen, because he would have to compete against 6 of the top 10 finalists from the World's Strongest Man in 2011, including none other than 2-time World's Strongest Man Zydrunas Savickas. So suffice to say, Eddie, as impressive as he was not ready to really push those monsters. Having gotten a taste of what it would be like to face the best in the world and struggle, Eddie got back in the lab to compete at the World's Strongest Man in Los Angeles.
First man up will be Eddie Hall, the Englishman. He is currently tied for 4th place in the overall standings, but he is a rookie. And Phil, this has got to be an ominous task
Eddie,
to step up to this apparatus.
Yeah, you know, Hall did really well on the Viking press, displayed incredible power. You think that kind of gym strength is going to translate well here, but he is a rookie, he's 24 years young, so you just never know. This is such a big, clumsy apparatus. It's all one piece.
Finally being on the greatest strongman stage was a massive thrill and represented his greatest feat as a competitor. But he quickly realized that there were even more levels to this shit, and he hadn't prepared nearly enough to hang with the elite of the elite. He wasn't able to progress past the group stage, failing to secure a top 2 placing in his heat with a score of 19 points. Instead, he finished 4th in his heat behind Nick Best, Mike Jenkins, and 2-time Iceland Strongest Man Hafthor Julius Bjornsson, a man who Eddie would become very familiar with over the course of the next 8 years. He'd return to all of the major shows in 2013, collecting his 3rd UK Strongest Man title, a 2nd place finish at the Giants Live in Hungary, and an 8th place finish at the Europe's Strongest Man, after filling in last minute due to another competitor injury. His struggles would continue at the Britain's Strongest Man, where he placed 12th. So if his most recent performances were any indication, he would need to be on point if he were to make any waves at the World's Strongest Man in 2013.
This is the 2nd World's Strongest Man appearance for Eddie Hall. The 25-year-old Englishman is 6'3", 357.
This performance would be a repeat of 2012, where he failed to secure a top 2 placing in his heat, instead finishing in 3rd with 24 points and missing out on the finals yet again. Eddie wasn't discouraged, nor did he want to give up. Instead, he was even more motivated to grind his way to the finals of the World's Strongest Man. He wanted that title, and nothing was going to stop him. 2014 ended up being his best year as he continued his dominance at the UK Strongest Man, and even doubled up and won the Britain's Strongest Man.
Well, this, if he takes 2 more in the next half minute, will put him into the lead of this deadlift and of the competition. He is tied for the lead and has 20 seconds. Hicks is blowing out at 4. Eddie Hall needs this. Really needs this for the lead. Look at the legs, they are trembling, and he has got it, and he locks it out at 9. He takes the competition, and he leads the event. To move now, this is mind over matter, and his mind says the pain does not matter. 2 full rotations for Eddie Hall. He is so determined to win this title.
2 major victories on the year. He'd also finished 7th at the Europe's Strongest Man and secured a 3rd place finish at the Giants Live Hungary. And this was the year where he earned his first finals appearance at the World's Strongest Man, resulting in a 6th place finish. Now, while Eddie had been a pretty well-rounded strongman, he certainly was never the best in the world at any point in time. A legitimate threat to the title? Sure, but he wasn't quite ready to win the whole thing. However, one event that he had always excelled in was the deadlift, a movement which over the course of his strength career he had rapidly improved in, and in 2015, he was ready to separate himself from the pack as he tried to cement himself in the all-time record books. Back in 2006, equipped Australian lifter Andy Bolton had become the first man to hit a 455 kilogram deadlift, breaking the 1,000-pound barrier. He'd break his own record 3 years later, hitting a 457.5 kilogram deadlift in 2009. It would take 2 years before Bolton's record would fall, as Benedict Magnusson, an Icelandic powerlifter and strongman, would one-up him with a 460.4 kilogram deadlift in April of 2011. Now, this wasn't a new occurrence, as the two had been exchanging the record for years. From 2003 to 2011, either Bolton or Magnusson held the record, and with no new record in 2012 or 2013, Magnusson would reset the bar in 2014 at the inaugural World Deadlift Championships. Set at the Europe Strongest Man event, he hit a 461 kilogram deadlift. However, with Bolton reaching 45 years old and not being able to reasonably continue to push his body to its limits, he bowed out, leaving Magnusson as the undisputed best deadlifter of all time. That was until Eddie Hall entered the chat. At the 2015 Arnold Strongman Classic in Melbourne, Australia, Eddie made an attempt at breaking Magnusson's all-time deadlift record by 1 kilogram at 462. An attempt which was undoubtedly surreal, given the fact that his childhood idol, Arnold, was not only in attendance, but just a few feet away from Eddie, cheering him on as he made his attempt. Trying to not only nab the all-time record, but make Arnold proud, Eddie gave it all he had. And just like that, Eddie Hall was now the all-time deadlift record holder, a title which amplified his popularity in not just the strongman community, but the fitness community as a whole. He went from a solid strongman competitor to a one of one, and that recognition gave him a nice little lane to shift his focus to. And while he was still committed to attaining his goal of becoming the world's strongest man, being the best deadlifter of all time had become a worthy side quest. The thrill, the adrenaline, and the rush were unparalleled from hitting that record, and he wanted to feel that feeling again. So just 4 months later at the World Deadlift Championships in 2015, he'd go up 1 more kilogram to 463, and crushing the attempt like he had the previous one.
Listen to this crowd. Last time he had Arnold cheering him on. Now he's got 7,000 strong fans. Come on, Eddie. Come on, Eddie. Yeah, you've got this.
Look at that bleeding shins. He's ready for a world record this day.
There's belief in his face. He's not stepping up just to have a go. He's already lifted this in his head. $463 kilos. 1,020 pounds.
The calm before the storm.
Here we go.
Come on.
Get his mental approach right.
That body.
Come on. Come on, Eddie.
World record.
Here we go. He's going to drive with the legs. It's coming up. It's coming up. Yes! Eddie Hall with a world record. How easy was that?
I didn't even look hard.
This was the first time that the record had been set twice in 1 year since Bolton had done it in 2006. And despite the strain of that pull, he was still able to manage a good enough recovery to not just bring his best to the world's strongest man, but returned to the finals once again and improved by 2 placings, finishing in 4th. Eddie's stock was on a massive rise in the strongman community, amplified by his social media content, highlighting his comedic and humble personality. He stood as the best in one event ever, an honor that very few people ever get the opportunity to earn, and yet you wouldn't even know it based on how he carried himself. The hype behind Eddie had become so large that he had a documentary released about him on his quest to becoming the strongest man in the world, called Eddie Hall Strongman. It was released in December of 2015 and directed by Matt Bell. Now, if only they knew what he would go on to accomplish just 7 months later. Now comes 2016, and while Eddie had just had the best year of his career, he knew better than anyone that the record was not safe at all, as Magnuson had been prepping and grinding on the sidelines to get it back. 2 years had become the average time frame for the record to reasonably change hands, and Magnuson was ready by the summer of 2016. But so was Eddie, and he knew that if he was going to keep the record, he would need to pull something big, something that he knew his competition likely wasn't going to come close to. He wanted to run away with it. This pull had to be undeniable, generational, and unprecedented. He wasn't aiming for a 1 kilogram increase. Hell, not even a 10 kilogram increase would be enough. So Eddie decided that he was going to go up a whopping 38 kilograms and attempt the deadlift of all deadlifts, something that was on the horizon but not expected to fall that soon. A 500 kilogram deadlift, half a ton. It was unconscionable, unimaginable that a human being could pull half a ton, but Eddie truly felt that he could do it. In order to be able to pull it off though, he understood the depths that he would need to go to. Grit and determination alone were not going to be enough. He knew he'd need to truly go to a dark place. A place that most normal folk wouldn't even think about. To achieve a deadlift of this magnitude would require more than just strength, because he already had loads of that, weighing in at 197 kgs, the heaviest he had been his entire life. Instead, he needed to practice some dark mental exercises. The lengths that Eddie went to mentally prepare for this lift were so extreme that he met with psychotherapists to recreate the scenarios he needed to channel that darkness.
I started talking with a psychiatrist first about how to sort of dive into this and how to access, get into that part of the brain, and then returned to a hypnotherapist who ended up working the two together, and we had to talk about things that got me angry, got me upset, things that I loved, things that I hated, and we were able to talk about a situation, and this situation was very dark and gloomy. That I can't say it out loud because you would seriously just think I'm an absolute sicko for thinking this in my own head. It's something that I had to do.
Channeling that darkness was the perfect complement to his training in the gym, and in consistently practicing the two together, he would ensure that when it came time to walk up to that bar, it was going to be lights out for the rest of the competition. So the stage was set, and it was going to be at the 2016 World Deadlift Championships held in Leeds, England, just like it had been the year prior. Magnuson was coming back to get his record, and the two would have what was sure to be a legendary battle, marking a new rivalry in the event. But before the first lifter even hit the platform, Eddie had an air about him that felt a little different than the rest of the competition. He was locked in and in a trance, pacing back and forth as the organizers set up the platform, likely in an attempt to tap into that darkness. Nobody wanted it more than he did, and that became very apparent from his very first attempt. While Magnuson would open up at 400 kg and make it look like paperweight, Hall had his eyes on a bigger number, 420. And the moment he hit that opening attempt in what the announcers called a speed rep, it became clear to everyone in attendance that not only would he not give up his record easily, but he was aiming to hit something absurd.
So much expectation, so much anticipation.
Oh my God! Eddie Hall performs a speed 420.
Now, as the rest of the field moved on to second attempts at 435 kilograms, with some hitting it and some failing, Eddie Hall decided to up the stakes by instead attempting to break his own world record on the second attempt, attempting a 465 kilogram deadlift, a 3 kilogram increase from his previous world record. And how this would move would be a huge indicator as to whether or not 500 keys would be on the table. With the announcement getting the crowd going, it was now just him and the bar, and he was going to remind everyone why he was called the Beast.
This weight lifted in human history. Ladies and gentlemen, rev it up for Eddie, the Beast Hall! World record attempt at the First Direct Arena. Here we go. Bill Kazmaier, this is truly history in the making. We're still in the infancy of this competition, and the Beast has gone massive.
I'm looking for speed, power.
Here we go! Wow! Oh my God, ladies and gentlemen! Unbelievable lift!
Unbelievable was an understatement, as not only had he just reset the all-time world record, but he made it look easier than all of his previous record-setting attempts, making it clear to not just the crowd, but to all the other athletes that he was on a whole other level. However, the record wasn't safe, as 465 was a figure that everyone else chasing this record had been aiming for, so it wouldn't be Magnuson that would follow Eddie. Instead, Dark Horse competitor Jerry Pritchett, who had smashed his 400 kg opener, was going to try his hand at making history himself.
Eddie's there. It's his chance. World record. Jerry Pritchett. Dedication. Determination. Power.
To equal the world record just established by the Beast, Pritchett.
He owns this weight. Owns the weight.
Oh, yeah!
The record was now a two-man tie, and with Magnuson up for his second attempt of the day at the same weight, it was clear based on his energy heading to the platform that he had every intention of joining the party.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Benedict Magnusson! Here we go, Benny at 465 to put 3 men on a world record equaling total.
This man has plenty of power to lift this weight.
Unbelievable, Benny Magnusson. 465, Pritchett and Hall both nailed this to the cross.
Get behind him. You want to see another world record? Let him know it. Come on, Eddie. All right. Benny, come on. Strong.
He's off the floor on his way through the lift. Benedict Magnusson with 465, 3 men on a world record equal.
And just like that, there was a 3-way tie for the current deadlift world record. But for anyone that was paying attention, they weren't the same attempts. While all 3 lifts were impressive, there was one that clearly stood above the rest. And that attempt was clearly Eddie's. First Direct Arena was packed with the most attendance of any strength sports event in history. The air was thick and the atmosphere electric as the fans watched in awe as the loaders loaded up 500 kilograms on the bar, half a ton. The prospect of even watching that attempt was gonna be surreal, so they'd wait in anticipation for the madman that was gonna try this first, and eventually everyone realized who it was gonna be. It was Eddie. Eddie was the madman, and this was gonna be his career-defining moment. With enough rest, hydration, and oxygen, it was time. The crowd was literally on the edge of their seats as he waddled his way to the platform, bold, confident, and seeing red. Everything he had been prepping for would culminate in this moment where Eddie would not be denied his rightful place in the history of human strength. As he stood in front of the barbell, loaded with half a ton of weight, he felt a mix of nerves and determination. He had trained for this moment for months, and Now it was time to execute. The support from the crowd was overwhelming, and he drew strength from their energy and encouragement. His family, friends, wife, and daughter were all there cheering him on, and their belief in him fueled his resolve. He took a deep breath, visualized the lift one last time, and stepped up to the bar. From that point on, he blacked out.
This is the moment that everybody has waited for, and the beast is calling down your support. History! The first direct arena delivers on the request, and Eddie Hall. Make history, come on! Sets himself.
Do it! See
for
it, do it!
greatness.
Do this!
Colin Bryce and Bill Kazmaier and the rest of the strength sport world watch on as Eddie Hall prepares for the half-ton attempt.
The initial phase of the lift was the most challenging. The barbell felt impossibly heavy as he began to pull it off the ground. Every muscle in his body strained under the immense load. His training had prepared him for this, and he focused on maintaining proper form and technique. Slowly but surely, the bar began to move. His grip was solid, and he felt the weight transfer from the floor to his legs and back. As the bar reached his knees, the hardest part was behind him, but the struggle was far from over. The lockout required every ounce of strength and determination he had. His back and legs were on fire, and the pressure was immense. However, he had come too far to fail. Summoning every bit of strength left in him, he completed the lift and locked out the weight. Grand opening, grand closing.
Ladies and gentlemen, yeah! Eddie Hall lifts the half-ton, 500 kilograms is off the floor. 500 kilograms has been done. 500 kilograms.
Eddie Hall had successfully recaptured his all-time deadlift record, and in the process, became the first man in human history to deadlift half a ton at just 28 years old. Now, while the crowd was absolutely losing their minds and in shock based on what they just witnessed, Eddie was completely unaware of what was happening around him. It was all a blur, because the moment he locked out that deadlift, he had literally pushed his body to a limit he didn't know he had, and that alone did an absolute number on him. At the top of that lockout, blood gushed from his nose due to the insane blood pressure spike caused by the blood vessels in his nose rupturing. The shock to his central nervous system and strain on his muscles caused him to temporarily lose motor function and collapse over the bar at the end of the lift. The true definition of giving it all you got. As all of this was happening, his wife looked on, extremely concerned, as he needed an entire crew of people just to tend to him. Eventually, he came back to his senses, and after coming to, he stood before the Leeds crowd triumphant. Eddie was so out of breath from the exertion that he could barely form coherent sentences when they gave him the mic, understandably so. But even in his disoriented state, he still made sure to not only speak from his heart, but give the most credit to the main person who was there with him along the way.
Let's have a round of applause for Eddie's wife. What a special moment for the whole family. What an incredible moment for the strength sport world.
If it wasn't for this woman, it wouldn't happen, honestly. She does everything for me. You know, she is my rock. I love you, baby.
But the meet wasn't over, and there were still two men that had to follow that up, or at least try. But Eddie still made sure to encourage them because he ultimately wanted to push the sport forward.
Even if Benny or Jerry now lift the 500, we will still be the first men to pull it today. I'm not going to be that selfish git that says I was the first person to pull 500. If Benny and Jerry come out and lift it, we share that title. We were the first men on the planet to lift the 500.
Power! Smoke it! Benedict Magnusson. Here we go! Not tonight for Magnusson!
Despite their best efforts, the weight seemed to have been a little too much for Pritchard and Magnusson, as neither of them could even get it past the shins. Not only did this cement Eddie as the sole record holder, but it made his lift all the more impressive. And to highlight the respect that his rival had for him, he grabbed the mic after the fail and used his only moments in the spotlight to give a massive congratulations to Eddie.
Am I okay to say something?
Folks, Benny Magnuson.
I just want to congratulate Andy Hall for being the first man to deadlift 500. Good job, dude. I gave it a go. It went up this much. Thanks, mate. I hope. But it's because he's got love and warmth, surrounded by his family. Congratulations, Andy Hall. You're the king.
Now, on that fateful day, the world saw Eddie's impressive feat. But the most fascinating aspect of this lift that very few would understand until years later was the aftermath and the sheer toll it took on his body. He had mentioned during his speech that people had no idea what he had to go through, and they wouldn't know what he was enduring backstage while everyone in the world was celebrating his achievement. That is, until 2020, when his YouTube channel broke the 500,000 subscriber barrier, and in a special video to the fans, he broke down in detail not just what he had to do to prep for the lift, but the scary consequences that he faced shortly after.
And at this point I realized that I was actually going blind. I lost the vision in the center of my eyes. I couldn't see around it. It was like an arc eye effect, and that's when I got quite scared, and I just lay down on my back, and I remember just staring at the ceiling in this horrible sort of hallway behind the arena, just staring at this very commercial ceiling with all air ducts and everything. I thought, this is where I'm going to die. This is it. This is where Eddie Hall dies. And luckily, I mean, you know, everyone around me, and then I know people are like wiping blood out my ears. I had blood coming in my tear ducts in my eyes. The blood was still coming out my nose. I think it was pretty evident, you know, I did something pretty serious. You know, I blew something up in my head that was pretty nasty. Took me about two and a half, 3 hours for me to sort of calm down, recover, my heart rate calmed down, my blood pressure calmed down. The ECG came back all clear. And you know, I was able to, you know, walk, get up, do a meet and greet after the show. Got myself back to the hotel and out, just done. You know, that was the most exhausting day of my life.
That sudden increase of force by bearing down and squeezing your intrathoracic pressure squeezes on your lungs and causes the blood in your lungs to be pushed into the heart.
I actually spoke to Eddie, I think it was 2 weeks before I saw him at an expo in London, and I asked him if he thought he could do the 500 kilos, and he looked at me with such conviction. He was like, I will definitely do it. And I started to believe him.
And then I recruited a hypnotherapist who we did a lot of work together, a lot of sitting down and just talking about scenarios and ways to approach the lift and what sort of mind frame to have. A very horrible, very, very horrible scenario involving my kids, and something that would trigger a massive rush of adrenaline.
Can you share that?
No,
no.
I can't. We're not without getting upset.
Yeah.
Regardless what people think, I'd never lifted above 460 kilos before that day. Never. So I was coming into that competition that day, and I claimed that I was going to beat the world record by 37 kilo in one day, which was obscene. It was obscene. If you put your heart and soul into something in life, you can achieve it. And it was just such a satisfying moment. The last few inches of the deadlift, I was just looking.
You were just showing it.
Just looking at the crowd, just like so pleased with myself.
Despite the terrifying aftermath of the lift, he still went on to compete at that year's World's Strongest Man, where he returned to the finals and medaled for the first time, earning himself a bronze. And just 1 year later in 2017, Eddie would cement his legacy once and for all by finally capturing that elusive World's Strongest Man title, the title he so desperately wanted since his first strongman show in 2007. After winning one more Britain's Strongest Man competition, he retired from being a strongman for good. He had initially thought about trying to defend his World's Strongest Man title once again before realizing that it just wasn't worth it. The strain of being 400 plus pounds wasn't worth it, and the toll that chasing the World's Strongest Man had on his marriage also wasn't worth it. So once Eddie decided to retire, he knew he wasn't going back.
I was walking around at 196 kilo was my heaviest, 440 pounds nearly. And it's a very dark place, a very, very dark place being that heavy. And I don't envy these guys, I'm looking at Janashia and Sadrunas. And although they look good on the outside, it's hard. It's hard walking around at that size and eating all the food that they eat and training all the time. And to be honest, it's a very sad lifestyle in a way. But they're doing great things. They're going out and winning gold medals, winning World's Strongest Man. It's a fantastic thing. But I'm just glad to be walking away from that, 100%.
Just because you keep saying it's a world record and Google says it's a world record,
it even says,
and you know what?
It even says out of competition.
When he looks back on that half-ton deadlift, he's filled with an immense sense of pride and gratitude. It was a moment that defined his career and showed the world what is possible when you push the boundaries of human strength. That lift wasn't just for him either. It was for everyone who believed in him and supported him along his journey. What started out as motivation to get in the gym from his favorite bodybuilder led to him finding his niche and etching his name among some of the greatest athletes to ever exist. Now, as is the cycle of competition, Eddie's record would stand for another 4 years before it would be broken by Hafthor Bjornsson in May of 2020. Before the attempt, Eddie even sent out a good luck message to Thor in a show of support.
Let's go, Thor. Come on. Let's go.
However, what should have been a seamless transition of history was mired in some controversy due to the circumstances around the lift. You see, it was a good lift, there's no question about that. But because he attempted the record right as the world was shutting down because of the pandemic, the conditions were drastically different. Thor had initially intended to break the record at the World's Strongest Man in Dubai. That was his intention, but he had to settle for Thor Power Gym in Kópavogur, Iceland, a gym which he's associated with. He did bring in an official judge and try to ensure that he would be judged with the same rigorous standards as anyone else. However, that didn't stop Eddie Hall from chiming in with his opinion as to whether or not he thought that the record should stand.
Well, what can I say? Well done to Hafthor Bjornsson today for lifting 501 kilos in his home gym. Genuinely, that's got my respect. From me to you four, big well done. I know what it takes. I still stand by what I say, whereas I think this should be done in a proper competition. Get rid of all that negativity, prove everybody wrong. I see this here, I had this commissioned by a friend, and he said, what do you want on it? It says at the bottom here, first to deadlift 500 kilos. I was never naive enough to think anyone would never beat this record, albeit in my lifetime. And I want someone to beat my record, so step up to the mark, let's do it in the same circumstances, let's get it in a competition, and prove everybody wrong, including myself.
But it wasn't just Eddie that felt that way. 4-time World's Strongest Man Brian Shaw, Robert Oberst, and another 4 times World's Strongest Man, Zydrunas Savickas, also agreed with Eddie that the lift should not be an official record.
In my opinion, it needs to be done in a competition. I will say that. It's about the competition factor when you're setting a record.
Everybody's going through so much. Like, we're stuck at home. I can't make money. I'm worried about bills. I'm sure Thor's worried about like keeping the momentum going and getting this deadlift out of the way so it doesn't come back around in 6 months and bite him in the ass, all that. I understand that. I get it. It doesn't mean that we get to negate the rules of combat. The rules of strongman, the rules of competition, they're in place for a reason.
All athletes must have the same possibility to improve those records. So if we start to have world records at home or own gyms, it should continue in special record attempts. But competition world records is competition world records.
The main point of contention was the fact that the lift was not attempted at an officially sanctioned competition, a setting where all previous all-time records had been set. So to a lot of fellow strongman and lifters alike, They felt that it should have been counted as a gym record instead, a debate which continues to this day. Hell, the argument around the validity of the record even turned into an entertaining beef between Eddie and Thor that culminated in a 1.5 year long wait for a boxing match between the two, which Thor won by unanimous decision.
Okay, your 501's a load of bullshit. Everyone on the internet says it's bullshit. Just because you keep saying it's a world record and Google says it's a world record. It even says,
and you know what?
It even says
you
out
can
of competition.
Out
of
I'm not
competition.
on the internet crying like a little
So calm down, calm down.
You say what?
Calm. Are you dead? Are you dead? Are you?
Oh, big shot.
And as of today, his record is still on the books as he stands alone as having the all-time world deadlift record. But the analyst in me can't ignore that there is something to be said about Eddie being 6 inches shorter and 32 pounds lighter, having only deadlifted 1 kilogram less. So if we take those measures into account, while Thor might have had the higher number, Eddie unquestionably had the more impressive lift. That is, until someone else comes along and smashes it, something which I doubt we're going to be seeing anytime soon. Eddie Hall, having slimmed down to a healthier 360 as of May 2024, is feeling much better than he ever has, and he's been focusing on his family, business ventures, and the occasional influencer 2v1 smackdown here and there. He even hit the mat with the interim UFC heavyweight champion, Tom Aspinall. Because why not? But despite no longer having that illustrious all-time deadlift world record, he does still have one title that nobody can ever take away from him. The first man in human history to deadlift half a f***ing ton. The greatest deadlift of all time. I'm Large Kofi. Thank you for watching.